They tell you the truth will set you free. That's a lie told by people who have never had to face a truth that's genuinely monstrous. The truth isn't a key. It's a surgeon's scalpel. It slices through the diseased tissue, yes, cutting away the tumor of a lie with cold, impartial precision. But it leaves you on the table, split open and bleeding, your deepest structures exposed to the unforgiving air. It leaves a scar you will trace with your fingertips for the rest of your days. My truth, the one that performed this autopsy on my life, had a name. Her name was Clara, my wife. On the surface, she was a study in gentle perfection, an artist who breathed life back into forgotten things. Her studio, tucked away on a quiet, cobblestone street in Beacon Hill, smelled of old paper, leather, and the lavender-scented glue she used to mend broken spines. She would spend her days saving stories, her slender fingers moving with a surgeon's own focused grace. She was my quiet harbor in the relentless storm of my own profession. I save lives by cutting people open. She saved them by piecing them back together. We were a perfect, poetic balance. Our marriage, I believed, was our masterpiece, a fortress built on the foundations of a shared trauma we had survived a decade ago. That woman was having an affair. But this isn't a story about infidelity. Infidelity was just the symptom, a fever spike indicating a hidden infection, the disease. The disease was far older, deeper, and more malignant than I could ever have imagined. To understand how I found myself standing in the smoking ruins of my world, you must first understand the beautiful, immaculate lie it was built upon. And it all began not with a scream or a confrontation, but with the scent of something that didn't belong. No, that's not right. It began with something I saw. It started with a pack of cigarettes in the wastebasket of our master bathroom. An empty pack of Gauloises, crumpled into a tight ball. I saw it while tossing a used disposable razor. The dark blue and winged helmet logo stood out against the white tissue paper like a drop of ink on snow. I don't smoke. Clara, with her near reverence for the fragile paper she worked with, abhorred it. I stood there for a long moment, the chrome and marble of our bathroom reflecting a distorted version of my face. My first thought wasn't anger. It was diagnostic, an anomaly. A foreign body in a sterile field. I am a cardiothoracic surgeon. My entire life is a disciplined process of observation, data collection, and diagnosis. I treat the human heart like a complex, magnificent machine. When a valve fails or an artery blocks, I don't get angry at it. I analyze the failure, and I fix it. I reached into the bin and retrieved the crumpled pack. It felt alien in my hand. I told myself there were a dozen logical explanations. A friend of hers, a contractor working in the building, a simple mistake. But the surgeon in me, the part that trusts patterns and recognizes symptoms, knew better. This wasn't just trash. It was the first echo of a distant explosion, one that had happened 10 years ago. And its shockwave, after a decade of silent travel through time, had only just reached my door, ready to tear my world off its foundation. Once a surgeon suspects a pathology, he cannot stop seeing the symptoms. Over the next 2 weeks, my life became a quiet, cold process of observation. I didn't change my routine. I came home from the hospital. I kissed my wife. I asked about her day mending the broken spines of 19th century novels. But I was watching. I was collecting data. The symptoms were subtle, almost imperceptible to a layman. A new scent that clung to her favorite cashmere sweater. Not her usual light, papery fragrance, but something darker, with notes of sandalwood and expensive leather. When I hugged her one evening and mentioned it, she flinched, a micro-reaction. But I saw it. It's a new essential oil diffuser at the studio, she'd said, a little too quickly. I think it's too strong. Her phone, once left on the kitchen island like a shared utility, now lived in her purse or on her nightstand, screen down. It was a small change, but it was a change in protocol. In my world, changes in protocol lead to catastrophic outcomes. The key piece of data came on a Tuesday night. I was on the living room sofa, using our shared iPad to review a patient's angiogram. I opened the web browser, and the previous search was still in the search bar. It wasn't a search for Italian restaurants or artisan paper suppliers. It was a search for an old news article. Boston Globe Archives, Olivia Reed, fatal car accident, October 14, 2015. The air in my lungs turned to ice. Olivia Reed, the accident. Our accident, 10 years ago. Clara and I were driving home from a friend's party. A deer darted into the road. I swerved. The car spun out on the wet leaves, hitting a tree. I'd escaped with a concussion and a broken wrist. Clara, a few bruises. But Olivia Reed, our friend's younger sister, whom we were giving a ride home, had been in the back seat. She hadn't been wearing her seatbelt. She hadn't survived. It was the single greatest trauma of our lives, the violent, tragic event. That had fused us together. We had survived it, clung to each other in the aftermath, and built our life as a monument to that survival. Clara, the doctors said, had retrograde amnesia from the trauma. She remembered nothing from the moment we got in the car to the moment she woke up in the hospital. I was the keeper of those terrible memories, and now, 10 years later, she was searching for it. Why? Why look back at that now? The pieces began to connect in a way I didn't like. Her recent sadness, which I had attributed to work stress. Her newfound distance. This wasn't just a simple, sordid affair. The ghost of that night was in the room with us, and I suddenly felt a profound, terrifying certainty that this affair, this secret she was keeping, was somehow connected to it. I felt like a doctor looking at a patient's chart, seeing a high fever and a strange rash, and realizing this wasn't the flu. This was something far more dangerous. Observation was no longer enough. I needed to move to invasive diagnostics. The thought was repulsive. To investigate my own wife felt like a violation of some sacred oath. But to live in ignorance, to allow a potential malignancy to grow unchecked, was a failure of professional duty. My marriage was my patient, and I needed to know what was killing it. Her studio was in Beacon Hill, a charming labyrinth of gas lamps and brick townhouses. I started driving by after my late shifts at the hospital. For 3 nights, there was nothing but the quiet, sleeping street. On the 4th night, I saw it. A black Audi A8, parked half a block down from her studio entrance. It was too sleek, too predatory for this historic neighborhood. I noted the time, 10:47 p.m. Clara had told me she was working late to finish a delicate restoration. The next week, I saw it again. Same spot. I took a photo of the license plate, my hand steady but my heart hammering with a cold, sick rhythm. The act felt sordid, the stuff of cheap thrillers, not my life. But I had to know. I didn't hire a gumshoe detective. That was too crude. My hospital, one of the most prestigious in the country, retained a high-end corporate security firm for vetting new board members and handling sensitive matters. I made a call the next morning from the privacy of my office. I spoke to a man named Mr. Davies, whose voice was as smooth and sterile as a new scalpel. I told him I needed a discreet background check on the owner of a vehicle, a personal matter. He asked no questions. He simply quoted a price that would make most people gasp and told me I would have a preliminary report by the end of the day. I transferred the funds and sent him the license plate number. Then I went into a 6-hour open heart surgery. I sectioned a man's sternum with a bone saw, held his living, beating heart in my hand, and meticulously stitched a bypass graft no thicker than a strand of spaghetti onto his coronary artery. For those 6 hours, my mind was a place of absolute calm and focus. There was no Clara, no black Audi, no gnawing suspicion. There was only the patient, the procedure, the elegant, biological machine I was tasked to repair. It was a relief. When I was done, I stripped off my scrubs, washed my hands for 10 minutes, and went back to my office. The email was waiting for me. The subject line was Clinical Preliminary Report. I opened it. The license plate was registered to a man named Caleb Reed. The name meant nothing to me. It was just a name, a data point. I forwarded it back to Mr. Davies with a new instruction, a full, comprehensive background check on Caleb Reed. Urgently, I went home to my wife. She greeted me with a kiss. Her lips were soft, familiar. Her eyes were full of a sadness I was finally beginning to understand was not sadness at all. It was guilt. The full report arrived 24 hours later. I was in my office again, the city lights of Boston a glittering tapestry outside my panoramic window. It was after 10 p.m. The hospital was quiet around me. I had told Clara I was stuck in a late consultation. The lie came easily, frighteningly so. I opened the encrypted PDF. It was a clean, corporate document, 20 pages long. Subject, Caleb Reed. I scanned the vitals. Age 38, profession, private wealth manager at a boutique investment firm downtown. Education, Horton School of Business. No criminal record, a few minor traffic violations. It was a portrait of a successful, unremarkable man. I kept scrolling, my heart rate steady, my breathing controlled. I was a doctor reviewing a chart, detached, objective. And then I reached the section labeled Family. Father, Jonathan Reed. Deceased mother, Marian Reed. Sister, Olivia Reed. Me breath caught in my throat. The name leapt off the page, a physical blow. Sister, Olivia Reed. Status, deceased. Date of death, October 14, 2015. The report was hyperlinked. My shaking hand moved the mouse, the cursor hovering over her name. I clicked. It took me to an online memorial page, a digital tombstone. There was a photo of a young woman with a wide, vibrant smile, and eyes that were the exact same shade of intense blue as the man in the driver's license photo in the report. It was her, Olivia. I leaned back in my leather chair, the air evacuating my lungs in a single, silent gasp. The sterile quiet of my office became a roaring vacuum. The neat columns of data on the screen blurred into meaningless symbols. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't a random man. This was the brother of the girl who had died in my car. The past wasn't a ghost, it was an assassin. And it had been stalking me for 10 years, waiting for the right moment to strike. The affair wasn't the disease, it was the weapon, the scalpel. And it was aimed directly at my heart. The question that had been tormenting me for weeks, why, was suddenly answered. This was revenge, but as the initial shockwave passed, a new, colder, and far more terrible question took its place. My wife, my gentle, loving Clara, was she a co-conspirator? Or was she the first victim? Chapter 5, Re-evaluating the Patient. World had shifted on its axis. My home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a potential staging ground for an enemy operation. My wife was no longer my partner. She was a variable I couldn't solve for. My surgical precision turned inward, becoming a form of self-torture. I replayed every memory of the past year through this new, horrifying lens. Clara's quiet weeping, which I'd tried to soothe, thinking it was stress. Was it guilt? Her sudden interest in my financial portfolio, which I'd seen as a welcome sign of partnership, was she gathering intelligence? The way she'd look at me sometimes, with an expression of such profound sorrow it had made my heart ache. Had I been misdiagnosing love when the real condition was pity or contempt? I held a dinner party for a few colleagues from the hospital. I needed to see her in a social setting, to observe her under controlled conditions. She was flawless. She was the perfect host, charming, witty, refilling glasses, laughing at jokes. She played the part of Dr. Vance's elegant, artistic wife to perfection. But I saw things I hadn't seen before. I saw the slight tremor in her hand as she poured wine. I saw the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. And I saw her check her phone, just once, when she thought no one was looking. She was a patient exhibiting classic signs of a severe underlying pathology, masked by a healthy-looking exterior. That night, after our guests left, I found her in her studio, staring at a half-restored copy of Anna Karenina. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. She jumped, startled. "Yes, fine, just thinking." "About what?" I pressed, moving closer. I could smell the faint scent of leather and old paper. "My home. About choices," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "How a single choice can change everything. For everyone, irrevocably." She was looking at the book, but I knew she wasn't talking about Anna. She was talking about us. About Olivia. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders, to shake her and demand to know whose side she was on. Was she a traitor who had willingly allied herself with my enemy? Or was she a hostage, trapped in a game she couldn't escape? But I did nothing. A surgeon cannot operate on incomplete data. A premature incision can cause the patient to bleed out on the table. I knew then that I had to force the diagnosis. I had to confront her. I would set the stage, control the environment, and perform the final, definitive test. I would lay out the evidence, piece by piece, and I would watch her face. And I would finally know if my wife's heart was loyal, or if it was hopelessly diseased. I chose a Sunday evening. A quiet, contemplative time when the city outside was winding down. I waited for her to be in her studio, her sanctuary. That felt appropriate. The final act should take place in the room where she mended broken things. I didn't storm in. I walked in softly, She was sitting at her workbench, not working, just staring into the middle distance. The air was thick with unspoken words. I didn't raise my voice. I placed a single sheet of paper on the antique wood of her workbench, beside a row of delicate bone folder tools. It was the first page of the report I'd received, the one with Caleb Reed's face and his connection to Olivia. "We need to talk about him, Clara," I said. My voice was steady, clinical. The voice I used to inform a family that a surgery had not been successful. She looked down at the paper. She didn't gasp. She didn't feign ignorance. A single tear tracked a path through the light dusting of paper fiber on her cheek, and then she let out a dry, ragged sob. It was the sound of a structure collapsing under a weight it could no longer bear. The confession, when it came, was not a trickle. It was a flood. "He found me, Ethan," she began, her voice cracking. "He came here, to the studio, a few months ago. He pretended to be interested in commissioning a custom binding. He was so charming, so understanding. She told me everything. How he had slowly, masterfully woven his web. He never mentioned Olivia at first. He just talked about loss, about secrets, about the weight of the past. He made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. He became her confidant, the one person to whom she could whisper the forbidden's name, Olivia. Then came the seduction. She described it not as a passionate affair, but as something sordid and transactional, a penance. She felt that by being with him, by betraying me, she was somehow balancing the cosmic scales for the life that had been lost. As I listened, a strange thing happened. The white-hot rage I had expected to feel was replaced by a cold, precise anger, directed entirely at Caleb Reed. He hadn't seduced my wife. He had preyed on her. He had weaponized her grief and her guilt. In that moment, I saw her not as a traitor, but as a casualty. A victim. I was ready to forgive her. I was ready to shield her, to declare war on this man who had violated our lives. "It's okay, Clara," I started to say, reaching a hand toward her. "We'll fight him together." She flinched away from my touch, shaking her head violently. Her eyes, red-rimmed and full of a despair I couldn't fathom, met mine. "No," she choked out. "You don't understand. You can't forgive me. Because he was right about one thing. We deserved it. I deserved it, because I lied, Ethan, that night. I lied to save you, and the floor of my world vanished." The confession that followed had nothing to do with Caleb Reed or his pathetic revenge scheme. It was about a lie that was 10 years old, a lie so fundamental it had formed the bedrock of my entire adult life. She told me the truth of that night. The real truth, not the edited version we had both silently agreed to accept. We had been at a party hosted by a senior attending physician. I was a resident then, desperate to impress, to secure a competitive fellowship. I had 2 glasses of scotch, maybe 3. I was over the legal limit. I knew it, but I was arrogant. I thought I was invincible. Clara had begged me to let her drive. I'd refused. It was my car, my responsibility. My ego. She described the moments before the crash. The slick roads, the speed, the way I was laughing at a joke a second before the deer appeared in the headlights, then the sickening screech of tires, the impossible physics of the spin, the final, bone-jarring impact. In the chaotic aftermath, in the smell of gasoline and wet earth, she had seen the look on my face. The terror not of the crash, but of the consequences. The DUI, the dead girl, the end of my career before it had even begun. And in that moment, she had made a choice. When the first state trooper arrived, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, she was the one who spoke. Her voice, she said, was eerily calm. I was driving, she had told him. Then, to make the lie uncheckable, she had faked the extent of her own injury. At the hospital, she had told the doctors and the police that she couldn't remember anything about the accident itself. The trauma had wiped her memory clean. A classic, unprovable case of retrograde amnesia. Her testimony was deemed unreliable. With no other witnesses, and with me the actual driver corroborating that she had been behind the wheel before her memory loss, the case was closed. A tragic accident, no charges filed. My career was saved. Our life together could begin. She had built me a future out of the wreckage of that night, and the price was a lie she had to carry alone, every single day, for 10 years. The affair with Caleb wasn't a betrayal of me. It was a desperate, twisted act of self-flagellation. A way to finally be punished for the sin I had committed, but for which she had borne the sentence. Asterisk, I don't remember leaving her studio. I don't remember the walk back to our house. My next clear memory is of standing in my own study, the city of Boston a silent, indifferent witness outside my window. The scalpel of truth had done its work. It had cut down to the bone. The infidelity, which hours ago had seemed like a fatal pathology, was now revealed to be nothing more than a superficial wound, a symptom. The real disease was me. My ambition, my arrogance, my cowardice. My entire sense of self was a fabrication. I wasn't the brilliant, heroic surgeon who had pulled his wife from a wreck and built a perfect life. I was a man propped up by a lie so profound I hadn't even been able to see it. My righteousness was a phantom limb. My success, a stolen artifact. I thought about Clara, sitting alone in her studio amidst her broken books. She had not been my fragile, gentle wife. She had been my silent, ferociously strong protector. She had carried the weight of my sin for a decade, and it had finally crushed her, forcing her into the arms of a man who was nothing more than an echo of our shared, buried crime. I looked at my hands. The hands that had saved hundreds of lives on the operating table. Steady, confident hands. But that night, 10 years ago, they had been the unsteady, criminally irresponsible hands of a drunk driver. Clara's confession had not been an attack. It had been a gift, a final, desperate act of restoration. She hadn't just been mending books all these years. She had been trying to mend the broken spine of our shared reality. The truth had set me free. It had freed me from the illusion of my own goodness. But freedom felt exactly like standing at the edge of a cliff in total darkness. The affair was over. Caleb Reed was a pathetic ghost who no longer mattered. All that remained in the room was the truth, and the two strangers who now had to decide what to do with it. Could a life be rebuilt on an exposed foundation? Could love survive an autopsy? I didn't know. All I knew was that the silence in our perfect house was no longer empty. It was filled with the deafening echo of a single, 10-year-old lie. And I had to learn to live with it. We both did.